Final Fantasy VII fans are eating good because just this past week, Naoki Hamaguchi went over a lot of details regarding Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, Final Fantasy VII as an IP, and really just Final Fantasy in general. The team over at Creative Studio One has been absolutely killing it when it comes to these remakes, not only just the quality of the games themselves, but getting these games out in a timely manner, having a consistent release schedule. And it looks like Remake Part 3 is no exception, along with some really interesting discussion around, multi-platform and where Naoki Hamaguchi thinks the franchise is headed next, where the franchise should head next. So if you are new to the channel, do not forget to like the video and subscribe to keep up to date with anything JRPG or gaming related in the future. And with that, let's get right into it. First off, we have Hamaguchi talking about the development of the Remake Part 3, and by the sounds of it, we might not have to wait long for this next entry at all. This comes from automatonmedia.com, and he says, quote, "Development is going extremely well, and the game is shaping up nicely. A lot of the content is already playable, and the game's direction and form are firmly set in place. Right now, the team is united around refining everything." I don't think I could stress enough just how appreciative I am about this type of communication when it comes to a development studio, especially in this day and age when games just take so long to make, and a lot of the time with little to no communication behind, the teams that are making these games. And for fans, people waiting on these projects, they can understandably feel frustrated because there's just no communication. Why should we feel any excitement when we haven't seen anything on a game for like 3 or 4 years straight? And again, this is an issue that has kind of become more prominent as the years have gone by, and unfortunately that is something that is probably going to continue, which is all the more reason why I appreciate Creative Studio One's openness and their progression on the development of this project. It feels like almost every every month we hear some detail about what's going on with Remake Part 3. I mean, you could see the passion, the love, and respect they have not only for the games, but for the fans themselves. Creative Studio One has just been such an efficient team across the board. When you're talking about development, when you're talking about communication, it's because of that it feels like we haven't even been waiting that long, because we're always getting something from this team. And I think it's safe to say that we could be seeing Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 as early as maybe late 2026, early 2027. And even if not that soon, I still think there is a very good chance that we could be seeing it as early as 2027. The thing is, Rebirth pretty much created most of the open world for the 7 universe, right? You have the grasslands, Junon, Corel, Nibelheim, Gongaga, and of course, Cosmo Canyon. Like, that is a very big chunk of the open world in 7. Obviously, you still have very important regions we still have to explore, like Rocket Town and Wutai, and maybe even a good chance of seeing optional islands you can find when just exploring on the airship. But the point is, they've already spent so much money on fleshing out, completing most of the regions in 7 back to back, all in one game. So unless they add completely new regions we've never seen in 7 before on top of Wutai and Rocket Town, I definitely don't see the open world taking as much development time as Rebirth. And I think most of that time is going to be spent on refining all of the characters' movesets, all of the new characters we'll get to play like Vincent, and maybe even some new characters we never got to play in the original. We'll also have the airship and all of the new mechanics that will come with that, so that will also take some money, but they already got so much of the assets that they can reuse. But if I had to throw my own guess as to what would take up most of the budget for this last entry, it's not the open world, but the insane jaw-dropping set pieces that we'll probably get to see because of the existence of the weapons. And I really do hope that's the case. I hope they go all out with the visuals, with the gameplay and mechanics. Like, they have the chance to go Final Fantasy 16 levels of epicness and just scale, but also it's a chance to be probably even better, right? So all in all, it's because of this, because of the communication from this team, and because, Rebirth has kind of done a lot of the heavy lifting for the open world, and now they can really reuse a lot of those assets for Remake Part 3, saving tons of time. It lends them so much freedom to all the new things they may add in Part 3, as well as all the existing things we know are coming, like the weapon fights and all of the, more focused story beats of, you know, the last part of disc 3, right? So very, very exciting stuff. Now, this next interview bit comes from JP Games, and it goes over Hamaguchi answering a question about the significance of Final Fantasy VII coming to the Nintendo Switch, and what that means for the Final Fantasy franchise going forward, what this franchise needs, especially now. Now, the interviewer says, quote, "For you personally, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is your first Nintendo production. For many Xbox fans, it may be their first Final Fantasy game. What importance do the Switch 2 and Xbox versions have for the Remake trilogy? Economically, but perhaps ideologically and emotionally?" With Hamaguchi saying, quote, "Yeah, so obviously, first of all, I can't speak as the overall representative of Square Enix as a company. I'm not one of the people that makes the final decisions on the franchise overall, but certainly from the position of someone who is in charge of the 7 IP in the moment, I can definitely tell you about how I feel about this in regards to the 7 series. It's very much like you say. I think there is a huge significance here in terms of this multi-platform development. Certainly, the move to Nintendo Switch 2 is perhaps the biggest part of that. As a child, I loved the Final Fantasy series. I was a fan. I remember the evolution of the Final Fantasy series. Final Fantasy VII is something symbolic of that change in direction of the Final Fantasy series. Obviously, that was when it moved from Nintendo hardware, which it had been on up until then, to the PlayStation. Then it went on its evolution on the PlayStation from there. The fact that we can now come back to the Nintendo hardware, I think, is symbolically very important. Obviously, the Xbox version is very important too, and that's really significant for different reasons. Overall, I think what this represents is an opening up of the Final Fantasy VII IP, giving opportunities for more people to become aware of it, to know of it, and to come to love it. That opening up and those new fans coming in is perhaps the most significant thing for me as a team and for my part of the company. Again, I think it shouldn't stop at 7. I really want to see this for the future of all Final Fantasy. It's kind of a new start in some ways. We're opening up to all platforms to bring in as many new people as possible and to get them on their journey with Final Fantasy. I see this as a new start for that, which is perhaps the most significant thing. And I find it funny because I think people are still in denial that Final Fantasy is really going hard on this multi-platform. I mean, even Yoshi P over at Creative Studio 3 had hinted at even Final Fantasy 16 coming over to Switch 2, which makes sense, and it's something that has to be expected because all of these Final Fantasy games going forward have to be multi-platform. It is a part of their strategy. It is something that they are dead set on. And of course, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, obviously coming to the Switch 2 and has already been confirmed to, and we have to assume Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 is also going to be on there as well, so it makes absolutely no sense to keep 16 away, even though that has already been hinted to be coming. So yeah, no, I think every mainline Final Fantasy going forward, as well as the recent ones that have just come out, will be multi-platform. I think with recent events at the company, it makes absolutely no sense for them to cherry pick what is going to be multi-platform and what isn't. It's more realistic to expect that none of these games are going to be exclusive to just one console anymore. But at the very least, they will be on PC as well. And yeah, like we've talked about with multi-platform on the channel before, this strategy in particular is extremely important for the Final Fantasy franchise as it currently stands. You know, it isn't the early 2000s anymore where these games can be exclusives and be completely fine. I mean, as the console generations have gone by, and especially now, we've seen so many third-party games comfortable with multi-platform and just be available to everyone, right? And this is something that is relevant, that applies to Final Fantasy so much because, you know, its current state is not looking too hot. Once upon a time, Final Fantasy was just one of those games you had to have. It was the JRPG series. And while it still holds the title of one of the most legendary JRPG franchises ever, it is nowhere near the popularity that it once was. And it's been very apparent that none of these recent games have had that cultural impact that those older games had. I mean, that is an undeniable truth. Of course, this problem obviously spans beyond just, you know, simple multi-platform and everything will be better. But at least with multi-platform, you'll be able to get these games out to more hands, more eyes than ever before. And unlike before, everybody will be able to experience these games day one at the same time. All the while significantly expanding on the Final Fantasy fandom, which is a very good thing and something that the Final Fantasy franchise desperately needs. Now, just to go over one last thing I thought was pretty cool was Hamaguchi was talking about what he would like to do after Final Fantasy VII Remake, some of the potential projects he would like to work on. He says, quote, "If I had all the time and money in the world, Final Fantasy VI is my favorite mainline title. That would be very cool to take on as a remake. That being said, I've put my heart and soul into the Final Fantasy VII Remake series for over a decade now. Working on something completely new would be quite fun as well. Look, love or hate the remake series, you can't deny that Hamaguchi is one of those directors who really understands Final Fantasy, understands the fans both old and new, and in my opinion, I think he's done a fantastic job with Rebirth. We'll see how part 3 goes, but I have no doubt it's going to be just as good as the last two. Maybe, and of course for a conclusion, I would hope so, even better. So the idea of 6 being remade with Hamaguchi at the wheel would be absolutely incredible. Final Fantasy VI has one of my favorite worlds, character designs, and concepts I have experienced in the franchise to this day. So if Hamaguchi was the one to lead that type of remake as well, I would be all for it. And same with a future new Final Fantasy game as well. I actually want that more for him than anything else. I think he's one of the few directors at Square Enix that really understands this franchise. He adores the work he puts in and the fans who come with it. And I think the direction he would take a new Final Fantasy if he were to lead one would be really interesting to see. And I think a lot of people would agree. Even someone as renowned as Yoshi P, someone who has been working on this franchise for well over a decade, has stressed that new blood needs to be working on Final Fantasy to take this franchise to places we've never seen before. Young blood like Hamaguchi who can carry the franchise for the next handful of games to come. And I very much agree with that sentiment. Anyways, with all of that said, let me know how you guys all feel about this down below. Do you think, like myself, that we'll be seeing the last part of the remake much sooner than we ever would have thought? Maybe even by the end of 2026 at the earliest. What do we think about Hamaguchi's comments on Multiplatform and him pretty much doubling down on the fact that the franchise needs to be this going forward? It needs to be on every platform day one. And after the 7 remake, would you like to see Hamaguchi take up a future Final Fantasy, whether that be another remake like Final Fantasy VI or a new Final Fantasy like maybe Final Fantasy 18 or 19, right? Be sure to let me know all of that and more, and I will catch you guys in the next one.